If you like grasping at straws, Villa did win the season series on aggregate. 1954-55, the last time Villa did the double over Manchester United. And you know, when the United 11 came out on Sunday morning, I was not overawed by what I saw. We've beaten much better Manchester United teams over the years, but Old Trafford is just so irritating. League, Cup, doesn't matter. You have to be 100% spot on the day. You need some luck. You need a refereeing decision, and we didn't get any of those. Let's review. Manchester United 1, Aston Villa 0. I think Katrin summed it up beautifully with this tweet, and I hope it's Katrin and not Katrine, but all runs have to come to an end at some point. I'm going to look back on these last couple of months, particularly the month of April, as one of my favorite months in the history of supporting this team. This run was as good as the one in the championship as far as I'm concerned, and we're 4 games away from a Europa League place potentially. Liverpool has a lot of wind in their sails right now. They're the biggest hurdle to overcome. But imagine with this squad what we've accomplished. What could happen if we add to this squad in the summer and give Unai Emery an entire season to work with? That gives me the tingles in my down belows. Look who was on correspondent duty this week for us, none other than Samir Gaby himself, in an absolutely cracking top. Where does this chap get all these tops? It's almost like he's some kind of a kit wizard. And the scenes at Old Trafford, they are impressive, let's be honest. And the noise coming from the away support section was also impressive, drowning out all the very quiet tourists who were in town for the game. It's such a shame that the supporters weren't rewarded for their fine efforts away from home. We call this the Holy Trinity Show, the 3 key issues or moments that defined Manchester United 1, Aston Villa 0, starting with the key statistics, which definitely favored the home side on this occasion. I looked at interceptions. This is where one team prevents the ball from going from one opponent to the next. Very interesting stat in a game that was compressed in the midfield, but it's all Manchester United all day. Accurate passing wasn't great for Villa. No big chances created. Less possession. 12 interceptions by United to Villa's 2. That tells a story. Big issue. Erik ten Hag is no slouch. This is a managerial, man management, and tactical heavyweight in this league. And when you consider what he inherited and how far he's taken it and the pressure cooker that he's in with that club. I mean, it's Ten Hag, it's Unai Emery, and it's Roy Hodgson, 3 guys who inherited really poor situations and have navigated their way out of them. And when you think back to what Ten Hag inherited, the toxicity around Ronaldo, they lost their first 2 games. He was getting absolutely eviscerated in the media. I remember that press conference. It was hard to watch. And since then, what's he done? Well, he's now navigating 3 competitions. They've had major injury issues. And you can discuss the merits and the pros and cons of being super honest in your media assessments of your team. Sometimes that backfires. He's somehow made it work. Just in this game, Ten Hag had to deal with field compression as Aston Villa aggressively and relentlessly squeezed forward with a high line, which some might have felt suicidal almost, you have to say. It was pretty ballsy from Unai Emery. I bet that Ten Hag didn't expect that level of aggression in compressing the middle of the field, and I wonder if he had a word with Marcus Rashford. Bend your run. It's only going to take one moment, which it eventually did. But also, think about the fact that Aston Villa is coming to this game having scored in 20 straight under Emery, and our chances in the attacking third were very limited, and that came down to a good setup by United, mostly in that middle third, I feel, where Villa couldn't connect passes, recover, or retain the ball. Alex Moreno was snuffed out a little bit there. This was a heavyweight battle between 2 managerial titans. And just by one moment, Ten Hag got the better of it. Contentious issue, Jared Gillette's performance. I've said on the show before that I actually quite fancy the Australian referee because he lets the players decide the game. He lets an awful lot go. I'm perfectly fine with that so long as it's consistent within the match. The problem is you can't have one standard one week and then a completely different standard the following week. That undermines the integrity of the competition. But I'm sorry to say, Jared Gillette's performance was not the reason why Aston Villa lost that game. The one that drew the ire of Villa fans was Casemiro's late challenge on Jacob Ramsey, which in any other game probably would have been a yellow card, wasn't given, but it was every bit as much a yellow as the John McGinn tackle on Christian Eriksen. And Guinea was wound up just before then, and that's usually what gets you the yellow card, when you're wound up and then you go after a guy. And I had to laugh because anybody who's played football at any level has committed one of those kind of fouls. You're wound up, you've had enough, you're chopping somebody down. That too, not given. Consistent. In fact, Gillette only handed out 2 yellows in this game, both of them late, and both of them were clear tactical fouls, preventing Villa from getting forward in the late stages. I'm okay with that. This is a man's game. Let the men play and decide it. It adds to the emotion, it adds to the intensity, and that to me is what the Premier League is all about. Key matchups, there were several of them, including Ashley Young versus Jadon Sancho. And you know what? I think I have to actually give the advantage to the soon-to-be 38-year-old. On the other side of the park, it was Alex Moreno against Bruno Fernandes and Dalot. And I will bet, going back to Erik ten Hag, that he watched Moreno's performance against Fulham and said, that is a player that we need to contain because they use him so much. Maybe Alex Moreno's first half against Fulham was a little bit too good, because that was certainly an area that I think Manchester United identified in their pre-match preparations. And later in that game, a big moment we'll talk about in the future on this show, it came down to Alex Moreno versus Bruno Fernandes, and didn't work out so well for the Spaniard. Big issue number 3. High line, high risk. This is not new from Aston Villa. They've played a high line before. They've been aggressive in their trap before. They want to push the opposing team out, force them to face their own goal rather than facing forward. We've seen it before. I just don't think anybody expected Villa to be so aggressive in their trap in this particular game. The problem at Old Trafford is you can't be 99% effective if you want to win. You have to be 100% effective. The other thing you could use now and again is the odd recovery or retention of the ball in the now compressed midfield, because it's in the midfield where Unai Emery's teams accelerate to attack. They beat that first wave, they win the ball and accelerate through. That simply did not happen in this game. When you squeeze from the back, you create compression in midfield, a lot of congestion and a lot of chaos. And I would suggest that a team that has a Casemiro in it wouldn't mind that kind of compression in midfield. I referred to the interceptions in our match stats, a number I keyed in on, and I don't know for sure where those interceptions took place, but I'm willing to bet the most of them took place in that neutral area. Villa simply could not retain the ball. They could not recover the ball. They couldn't complete passes. When it came time to clear urgently from the back, we weren't winning those duels either. And this was a big part of that game, because it was through those kind of moments of chaos and duels and who's going to get to that ball first that we conceded. Big issue number 2, squad spent. You don't need to have a UEFA Pro license to have seen some clues that this Aston Villa team is running on fumes right now. They've played 4 intense games in the space of 2 weeks. Look at me. I'm just doing shows for you, and I'm exhausted. Doing 4 shows in 2 weeks when I'm traveling every single weekend and trying to manage my work life, still coming off the high of England, I'm not running 8.4 or so kilometers 4 times over the course of 2 weeks, and I'm shattered. And a great example, a little tiny example, is Ollie Watkins and being caught offside. But when you're tired, you cheat a little. You try to leave early because you're not sure if you could win that first 5-yard foot race. I mean, this tells a story. Ollie Watkins was caught offside 3 times in that first half alone on this entire run of his where he's been sensational. I don't think he was caught offside 3 times in like 11, 12 games. Definitely 1. And that was the goal that was chalked off at home to Newcastle, and it needed the laser lines. That's how switched on he's been in those races. I also think he's tired mentally. Ollie Watkins is shattered, as are many of his teammates, and you really cannot blame them. It's been a taxing run. There's been a lot of really important, stressful games, and they still have 4 to go. And the number 1 big issue or moment that defined Manchester United 1, Aston Villa 0, the 39th minute moment. As I alluded to in point number 3, high line, high risk. If you are off by a split second or a fraction of an inch because you weren't quick, confident, or coordinated as you vacate your defensive zone, you are risking trouble. But it's never just one thing that occurs when a goal is scored. Oftentimes, it's the accumulation of a number of factors that lead to goals. Let's start with Emi Martinez's long ball, which on the day wasn't very good. It was 42%. So he had 24 attempts in total. 20 yards or more is what a long ball is. He only completed 10 of them. And I know Unai Emery likes the higher percentage build-up along the ground and out of the back. But on this occasion, late in the half, for whatever reason, Emi Martinez decided to drift the ball into a congested midfield. Was it the ball? Was it a duel? Was it a combination of both? We can argue those things. But from a 50-50 ball perspective, it wasn't even a 50-50 ball on the day. It was a 42% ball on the day. The critical duel that ultimately changes the course of this game is between Casemiro and Emi Buendia. And I'm not going to say anything about Emi Buendia in this game other than, who do you think's going to win that duel? You've got Casemiro coming to the ball, and you've got Emi Buendia backing into the ball, and he's a foot smaller. I've said on this show so many times, the thing that is missing in this squad is stature. And I don't like people who are always so obsessed with height, because this is not necessarily a tall man's game. You can be a smaller man and succeed in football. But here's an example of a one duel that changes the course of it. And isn't it interesting? Manchester United was having no joy with the weight of passing behind. Not on the floor, not over the top. It was either too long, too short, or mistimed. But it's a header by arguably Manchester United's most important player that finally undoes the high back line of Aston Villa. After that, though, there was a lot of discussion about Emi Martinez's role in the parry. We know the kind of guy Emi Martinez is. He went on television with Ian Wright this past week and talked about mental health and the need at times for professional help in sports psychology. This came out of his first game in the World Cup where Argentina lost. He sought some advice. That's because he's a proper man, just like Ian Wright, 2 people I absolutely adore and admire. So Debu will be the first person to step up in that dressing room and say, guys, I could have done an awful lot better with that. I should have absolutely smothered it, because it wasn't lashed with a whole lot of pace. It was probably as slow a shot as I've seen Marcus Rashford take. And I'm actually wondering, and by the way, I have a lot of time and respect for Marcus Rashford as well. Class guy, good player, what a year. I almost wonder if he looked at the situation and the angle and the slick surface, saw Bruno Fernandes bearing down the right, and actually hit it into that area for that very reason, that there might be a parry and some crumbs spilled. So now that that action has occurred, it's how everybody else reacts that matters. We tell forwards, always expect the ball will somehow arrive at your feet and have those feet ready. Defenders, always expect the worst case scenario calamity and be ready to react. Alex Moreno shoulder checks. So he must have known that Bruno Fernandes was bearing down over his right shoulder, but there is a late acceleration, a late realization, and that split-second delay is the difference between blocking the shot outright and merely deflecting it so it loops over Emi Martinez. And then Tyrone Mings, he just needs to stay stationary and upright and cover his goalkeeper, but he slips. A lot of players slipped. Emi Martinez slipped. Remember that one that went past the post? Oh, and how about Ollie Watkins slipping, or was he pulled back? I don't know. I think he just slipped. But what a ball across by Emi Buendia. That would have been a tap-in. So bottom line, Villa Park's groundskeepers 1, Old Trafford's groundskeepers 0. So irritatingly, nauseatingly, Bruno Fernandes makes it 7 goals in 8 games against us. That is some kind of a record, and I hate it. And it's a series of little errors or micro decisions that go wrong, not one big one. It's not Emi Martinez's fault that he drifted a ball into a crowded midfield, or little Emi for not winning the duel, or the back line for not stepping fast enough, or for Emi Martinez parrying the ball away into danger, or Moreno not getting there quick enough, or Tyrone Mings staying on his feet. It's all of it put together. But that does not erase what has been a sensational month for our football club that I am so proud to be associated with, because this was probably as good a month and a run as the Championship 10 games. Don't you think? Because of where we are, the hope it gives us. How about Unai Emery having a preseason and a whole season and being able to handpick some more players to augment our squad? And how about our crowd, by the way? Oh my goodness, I almost shed a tear when our supporters started singing God Bless Joel Glazer. Did I hear that correctly? Oh my God, it was beautiful. Or how about cheering Harry Maguire when he came on? Oh, Samir and all of his colleagues traveling to that game. Fair play, I say. It's just that it's so annoying that so many of our runs always seem to end at Old Trafford. There was barely any change made to the categories that we tabulate throughout the course of the season. Villa's away record, not improving. No VAR, no Watkins-Bailey goals, no set pieces against the top 6, 7 out of 30 points earned this season, and no more clean sheets for Emi Martinez. So it's off to Molineux and the Black Country, and the problem with this match is it comes around too soon for any of our reinforcements, at least in a starting capacity anyway. And then there's no chance that Wolves will be as horrendous as they were the week before at Brighton. So they were humiliated. Now they're coming home. That's going to lead to some kind of response, you have to think. And it's a fixture that should elicit a response regardless, because it's against Aston Villa. I don't know what it is about this particular venue, this opponent, this fixture that I don't like, but I don't have the greatest feeling going into it. I should look it up. I should just look and see what the actual record is at Molineux over the past few years, but it just feels to me like it's not a great place for us to go, and that the Anwar El Ghazi late penalty that John McGinn drew was an anomaly and feels like a lifetime ago. What a game that was for Emi Martinez, by the way. Now, in this coming weekend's fixture, there is one matchup I'm extremely intrigued by, and that is ex-Wanderer Leander Den Donker against Daniel Podence, who is always the best player on the field anytime he faces Aston Villa. Because, you know, Leander's going to be up for it. Podence is always up for it. Those two are going to come together. Let's watch that. Let's call that our marquee matchup heading into the weekend. Obviously, Unai Emery will know Julian Lopetegui very well, how he likes to set up, some of his tendencies, and I'm sure Unai is in his secret footballing laboratory conjuring up some kind of wacky tactical plan for the match. But here's the question that intrigues me. I think you and I both realize that if Villa really has designs on Europe, this is a game that they have to win to try to keep that momentum going. I mean, I would have said at the beginning of the year, in fact, I did, single-digit places in the table would have been a fantastic accomplishment. Well, they've got that now. We didn't realize they were going to push so far that they'd be in contention for European places. So how does Unai Emery approach these games? Do you actually allow for more risk going forward? That's not really in this team's nature right now. Then there's the issue of fatigue, which has to factor. You don't want to lose any more games if you don't have to, because you still don't know what the other teams are going to do. It's a very tough balancing act right now. But this Wolves game for me, don't win this, not sure, because I said it was going to take 65 points probably to get yourself in the European discussion. And that will mean having to kind of run the table here. By the way, I've got some big news coming. Big news for me and my family. Hopefully big news for you as well, because I do this for you. I'd like to do more, obviously, but it's really hard when you're trying to do it on the side of your desk or cram shows in between a mountain of work with your regular job. I'll tell you something next week. How about that? But needless to say, my trip to Aston Villa was way more life-changing than I thought originally. I hope that you're enjoying the onset of spring. Are you feeling spring where you are right now? Because the flowers are popping up here. Do you know what I'm going to do tomorrow? I'm going to barbecue. I'm going to barbecue myself a few racks of ribs. I might even have some bourbon with that. So until the Wolves game, be well, stay positive, and as always, up the mighty Villa.